Berrynose is a side character who we've gotten to know over the course of 5 different arcs, and during this time he barely interacted with the plot with the exception of when his tail was severed and his dating fiasco with Honeyfern. But in the Broken Code, everything suddenly changed as he is dragged into the spotlight as Deputy ThunderClan. Even though this arc has many antagonists, Berrynose somehow manages to stake his claim with his cultish devotion to the imposter even after his exile. But this sudden change left a few people like myself wondering if this was even in character. We've seen his dubious morals in the past in the case of him dating his dead mate's sister, but this is in a whole different ballpark. So I went back and reread the books and was surprised to find that this was completely in character. Let me explain the slow downfall of Berrynose from a benign side character to a malevolent villain. A plot that has been slowly in the making for years without anyone even realizing it, possibly including the Aarons given what we know about their writing process. Before we get started, I'm going to ask you to subscribe. I put a lot of time and effort into my work, and subscribing would encourage me to do more. I'd also like to thank the current subscribers for their support. As a small artist, every one of you means a lot to me. This analysis will also contain spoilers for the newest arc of Warriors, The Broken Code. If you've not read that series and are planning to in the near future, wait until you finish the most recent books to watch this. Without further ado, let's start from the very beginning. Berrykit was born outside the clans to Daisy and Smokey alongside Hazelkit and Mousekit, though they moved to ThunderClan before Berrykit had much of the taste of the life of an outsider. He later slips outside the clan camp to hunt, however ends up losing half of his tail to a fox trap. This may be an early sign of impulsive behavior, though many kits other than him have snuck out of camp to hunt, such as Cloudkit and the Three. Him getting a permanent injury is the only time this has happened in canon, and I don't believe he even knew the added risk of the fox traps when he headed out of camp at the time. As he's struggling in the fox trap, there is a patrol of Shadow Clan warriors who make no attempt to help him as he is not clanborn and hence isn't a kit protected by the code. The injury and the comments of the patrol lead Daisy to temporarily leaving the clan, saying that they don't belong there. This is an early experience of alienation of Berrykit, something that will come into play later. He doesn't feel like a clan cat, and it's not just the cats in his clan who think it, it's also the Shadow Clan cats. We pick up later in Power 3 where Berry Paw's apprentice under Brambleclaw. He is mentioned to be called a kitty pet by Owlpaw at a gathering, the second instance of abuse by Shadow Clan towards him, but other than that, I don't think there's much interesting about him in the first 2 books in Power 3. He of course becomes a warrior in the 3rd book. Immediately after he becomes a warrior, he begins bossing the other apprentices around. This is something which will foreshadow his abuse of power later in the Broken Code. During this time, Berrynose tries to order warriors from Shadow Clan around during a border dispute, telling them to mark their own borders better and gets sentenced to clearing out the Elder's Den. Perhaps the reason he did this was because he was feeling so angry towards all the times that Shadow Clan cats were being rude towards him. At the same time, Honeypaw begins crushing on him, much to the dismay of literally everyone else in camp. By the time sunrise occurs, Honeypaw, now Honeyfern, has moved into a relationship with Berrynose. The two are discussing prospects of kits when the worst tragedy occurs. An adder lunges at young Briar Kit, but Honeyfern blocks the adder and ends up dying of its poison. Despite the tragic loss of his mate, he soon moves on to his sister, and it is noted that it even happens in the same book his mate died in. Poppy Frost is pregnant by the time the 4th apprentice begins, which is around 6 moons after the previous arc, and he practically forces her into the nursery. This is probably because of the fate the wife had when she died and he was just being cautious. Speaking of his past wife, Poppy Frost begins to have some doubts about her relationship to Berrynose and goes to the Moonpool asking for guidance from her sister. She feels like he doesn't truly love her and that she's just a replacement, however, she is told otherwise by StarClan. Despite the word of StarClan, I agree with Poppy Frost. Berrynose moved on way too fast, making moves on his dead wife's sister in the same book that she died in. Maybe this is because the love from his mate works as an affirmation he's worth as much as any other clan cat. Him displaying his family just goes, look, I am like all the other clan-born cats and I have a mate and I'm a warrior. Berrynose then promptly becomes not relevant for the rest of the arc and the entirety of A Vision of Shadows. However, what little characterization he has remains consistent. His rashness, his bossiness, all perfectly preserved for when everything comes together in A Broken Code. During the first gathering centered around codebreakers in the Silent Thaw, he calls out in favor of punishing those who have broken the code. He even calls out Therese, saying that he's disrespectful of the clan's traditions as an outsider. This sounds a tiny bit like projection, that he's putting his own insecurities onto this new rogue cat in order to draw attention away from his own status as an outsider. In order to do so, he displays his own insecurities as a way to accuse others, and his insecurities are that he will never be respected along his clanmates because he was not clan-born. Soon after this, Squirrelflay is exiled from ThunderClan, and Berrynose becomes deputy to Bramblestar, his former mentor. Just like when he became a warrior, he begins to abuse his authority, snitching on cats who go against his rules. He even cakes dirt on 2 warriors. He sucks up to Bramblestar, such as calling himself a mousebrain for not sending out hunting patrols earlier. Bramblestar develops an uneasy trust with him, as together they attack the cat late at night. However, Bramblestar is attacked in an assassination attempt, and after that, all the trust falls apart. Bramblestar reveals privately to Bristlefrost that he thinks that Berrynose did not help protect him during this assassination attempt as much as he should have. He accuses his former apprentice of being a traitor and exiles him. Berrynose, with nowhere else to turn, temporarily joins the rebels. However, he soon ends up on opposite sides to the rebels in the final battle in the book. He ends up dead and was described as having his throat and belly raped by Tawny Pelt's claws, and I can't help but imagine that he was killed in much of the same way that Scourge killed Tiger Claw. Him fighting for Bramblestar despite his exile really shows how badly he wants to fit in. Like it or not, Bramblestar is his leader, and he would respect his word regardless of being exiled. Because he wants to be a clan cat, he wanted to have wild blood, but he knew he never would, so he substituted that with cultist devotion to his leaders. Throughout his arcs, even though he grew to be a senior warrior, he just couldn't help but feeling out of place. So he projects out on others, bullies cats below his rank, and sucks up to authority in order to feel he really has a place in his own clan. When the imposter arrived, the clans were in a changing world without StarClan or any other guide. The imposter took advantage of the fear that comes from changing conditions in order to create the perfect, ruthless deputy in Berrynose. The imposter, or Bramblestar, was one of the only constants in his life as his mentor. So Berrynose places full trust in him because he was the only thing that Berrynose knew would never change. Berrynose is a much more twisted mirror of Fireheart and Cloudtail. Those two were able to outgrow their roots, but Berrynose was never able to do so, and his insecurities lasted throughout his adulthood, eventually bubbling through to the surface. Combined with his bold and fiery personality, it was a perfect formula that has been brewing for years to create an interesting villain. I do a lot of research for this video. It would mean a lot to me if you subscribe. I'm a smaller channel, so every one of you means a lot to me. I upload Warriors and Wings of Fire animations and analyses every single week. And of course, a thank you to my current subscribers for your continued support. That's all, Rogan out.